It is my distinguished honor to introduce to you the Comptroller of the County of Albany, Mr. Michael Connors.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I promise not to go 52 minutes this year. There's only 43 slides, so it should go pretty fast. We did email everyone a copy of the Fisc, so you'll have it. So if I start to go too fast and it doesn't make any sense, you can go, pick it up from your email, or you can look at it online. There are a lot of people to thank for this. Obviously, our legislative affairs person, Annie Lee, does a great job dealing with the legislature, and we appreciate all the work she does and all the meetings she attends. Does a wonderful job for us. Ashley Brennan is our technical writer and has done a great job, not only in putting together a wonderful report, so if it looks good and you like it, that's Ashley's work. When you see numerous mistakes in there, that would be me, so don't worry about that. My boss, Sue Kane, has been instrumental in helping pull all this together, and of course, all the fellows working along with Chip Dodd. So we really appreciate that. One other person who is so quiet and so humble and so self-effacing is a longtime county employee, John Brannigan. And John hates it when I do this, but John is a tremendous asset for the county and does a wonderful job. And none of this information would be available for you if it weren't for John's efforts, and I do appreciate his help. So we'll start through the slides. The bottom line is we had a good year. And I think it should put to death the idea that we can't run the county successfully and still operate a nursing home. So I think that is going to be clearly settled. I will say that the change of the way I do the Fisc now is a result of the work that the legislature and the executive accomplished last year. As you know, I go through 1,000 different remedies every year. And if the lights were low enough, you'd all be asleep. But last year we focused on the nursing home, and I'm very pleased. You folks have done a tremendous job working together with the executive to come forward with some really great professional management you're bringing in. I think it's going to make a lot of sense, and I think it was a courageous step to be the first to try and pull this together. So we do appreciate that. I'm going to talk today, after we go through the results, about poverty. And it's interesting because I looked at it and I could only find 17 out of the 18 last Fiscs. And in 17 of them, in every one of them I've mentioned poverty. And I don't think anybody really looks at it or thinks about it. But when we go through the poverty section, I think you'll be shocked, as I was, when you look at the census map. If you look at the overall results, the good news is, as you can see, the undesignated fund balance, which typically what we all think of as surplus, went up by $7.5 million. We're at about 8.25% of the total net revenue, which is close to where we should be. We should be right around 10%. The appropriations is about 8% of the 2014 appropriations. The revenue went up roughly $12.5 million last year. Expenses were up about $8.3 million. The excess of the revenue over expenditures is about $4.5 million. And when you look at the total fund balance, you'll see that went up by about $5.4 million. And to anticipate a question, because of encumbrances that were liquidated, that would make the fund balance about roughly $2 million less. But you had a very good year, and I think you all deserve a lot of credit. But I think we need to give a round of applause to the 2,400 plus county employees who've done a phenomenal job for us in the last forever. So, if you look at the revenues, you'll see we exceeded our sales tax from last year by $1.3 million, and I'm not sure what you have budgeted this year. I don't have the number at my tips of my fingers, but the county share will be $144 million last year. The property tax is a notable number, and you'll see about almost an $11 million increase. That property tax does give you two real distinct analysis of the economy. One, collections are much better. As you know, you had the courage to raise the taxes by almost 9% 2 years ago. We're starting to see the benefits of that. People actually are in a good enough state to pay taxes, so we've had better collections. So that is a significant number and did help improve your results. Tobacco settlements are down again. It was supposed to be $7 million. We talked about securitizing that a long time ago. Nobody was interested, but so we've lost about $3 million of that in revenue a year. You can see the others that are modest changes. Next, please. Then you'll see the total tax items are up by the 10.9, which is primarily the property tax, as we said. You'll see your other incomes. Notably, on the biggest loss of revenue that we have is from our friends right over there. Thank you, Governor and Assembly and Senate. $5.3 million loss in state aid from the year before. So when they're talking about their 2% tax cap, they aren't talking about a 2% spending cap or their ability to mandate services upon us. Federal aid is up $6.7 million. Transfers are down about $300,000. On the expenditures on the chart for the comparison, personal services up $2.8 million, which is a new high for us on personal services. I will tell you that we'll be giving a report to Personnel Committee in about 2 weeks. Tony Fontanelli did a great job in this. We looked at the amount of hiring and we saw, gee, there was 300 and some odd people hired last year. It was pretty shocking on a 2,400 employee base. In 2012, we put 232 on, 387 last year, 25 in the first month of this year. So we did it, we drilled down and said, gee, how can we have this? So in the last roughly 11 years, Albany County has hired 2,900 people. 2,900 people, roughly 3,000 people. If you look at the population that still works with us now and that was with us 11 years ago, it represents about 1,780 people. So for those 600 or 700 positions, you can see the kind of churn and the spin where you've had some of these jobs turn over 3 and 4 times in that period of time. If you look at Medicaid, your largest single expense, totally mandated for the services, mandated for the eligibilities. We have no control of that system at all. $66.7 million. The rest of those are fairly close on the dollars of where they were before. The transfer to the nursing home, that's the residential health care, was $8.8 million last year. There is good news though. You've seen some good things happen at the nursing home. That's continuing. We got news from NISAC probably 2 or 3 days ago, and I sent emails to the leadership. The feds have sat down and confirmed that the 2012 IGT money is going to be there, and actually it is going to be increased from what it was in 2011. So that will be a good news for you on your IGTs. If you go to the next page, if you look through the general government, interestingly enough, in health, there was a decrease in spending. There's an anomaly there. We've not really drilled into that, but we'll be looking at it. Your welfare costs, your economic assistance, look like they're down $475,000. I'll be talking about that. But when you think about what we spend on that, if you add economic assistance, what the jail does, you start putting together that, mental health, the road patrol, you start looking at what it costs to deal with poverty in this county, you're talking close to $300 million out of your $580 million budget. So it's significant. Culture, recreation, that's down a little bit. Home and community services up just slightly. Interest expenses next to nothing. As you know, the interest rates are terrible. Employee benefits are up about $1.5 million, $1.6 million almost. And the transfers are up a couple of million. Next slide, please. These are balances. You can see that, you'll hear, oh, we're broke, we don't have any cash, we're in trouble. Those are cash balances. You can see them by the week or every other week, however you have it. But that's there, and it's charted on the next page. And, you can see what the low periods are. Obviously, January, February, before the taxes start to roll in. And then at the end of the year, you have a dip because you've gotten to the end of your budget year. Next chart, please. Our focus is going to be policy failures at DSS. It's the way it's set up by the feds, the state, and by us. Flip to the next chart on poverty. I'm going to go through these very quickly, but there's a gentleman by the name of Robert Moffett who is a well-recognized expert on poverty in the United States. He gave a presentation May 2nd to the census group. I think it's the U.S. personnel, or it's the Presidential Address to the Population Association. The Population Association are all the experts on the census and the counting. His report is coming out in 2015, but he had a brief precis of what he's going to talk about. And it raised two questions. And the first is, since 1935, what are we doing for the poor, particularly since 2007 with the market crash and the economy cratering in the greatest recession we've had since the Depression. And the questions that he was concerned about is that, well, are we spending more or less on fighting poverty? And the second question is, have there been winners and losers? The short answer to that, the answer on the first question is yes, and you'll see in the charts, and I'll go through this lightning fast, you'll see that we've had a significant increase in spending. And the interesting thing for any of you guys and gals that are policy wonks, prior to '86, we were focusing as a nation more of our money at people who were at 50% below the federal poverty guideline, roughly $11,800 for one person, $23,000 some odd hundred for a family of four. So we were spending most of the money on the really poor. What's happened, and as he calls it the deserving poor, there's a greater spending of the money on the group that it's 50% above the federal poverty level. If you go to the next chart, please. These things, when you look at, and this gives you the context of the welfare system. If you go to the next one, we'll go through some of the first three things that came out. They came out in '35. You had two that were social insurance. Social Security, which was a retirement benefit. You paid in, you got a benefit. There were requirements. 10 quarters at least $1,200 a quarter. So you paid into that. The unemployment insurance that started in 1935, same thing, you paid into that. The only real welfare program that came out in 1935 was to aid the dependent children. They didn't, at that time, they were taking care of children, but they didn't take care of the widows. And it was at that time mostly men that were disabled. And the men that were disabled or died, the disabled did not get any benefits until quite some time later. Then, the big next step with that was a book that came out during President Kennedy's term, and it was about the other America, and you remember that. It was all about Appalachia and some of the other things. Well, we have poverty that bad in our own county. And Johnson's War on Poverty started out, and his idea, and it was talked about a hand up, not a hand out. And the food stamp program then came shortly thereafter and later in 1964. Medicare and Medicaid were social insurance programs and welfare programs that were passed in 1965. And the Medicaid program came to New York State in 1965. And a short aside for you, when this was originally done, the attorney that was working with Rockefeller on that, Medicaid in New York State was going to take all the poor and put them on the New York State health insurance policy. Some wise guy on Division of Budget said, hey, if we change this, we can send the counties half of the bill. So that's how it happened. If you look at the National School Lunch and School Breakfast Program, they actually started in 1966, but it took quite a while for them to go countrywide. Next chart, please. There was an expansion of the housing voucher program. As you know, there had been public housing forever, but they started to go with a voucher that could be used with a private landlord. Nixon actually had something, believe it or not, an expansion of the welfare program. He had a guaranteed annual income for the poor. And he introduced it twice, I think in '71 and '72, and it failed. And I can't imagine why he couldn't get anything through Congress then, after breaking into other places. But SSI, Supplemental Social Security, came in 1972. And you'll see an interesting chart about that later. Next slide, please. The Women, Infants, and Children program, the WICS program, came in 1975. The Earned Income Tax Credit, the earning subsidies in '75 as well. And right up to that point, you had had an explosion of benefits and programs from 1935 to 1976. And then there was a retrenchment that began. Carter tried for a higher income universal eligibility jobs creation program that never made it to the floor, let alone got voted down. Next slide, please. The retraction and retrenchment of welfare state expansion has been going on. There's been debate about it in Congress as far back as 1935, and the idea of trying to not build dependency but help people get back to work. Johnson's hand up, hand out in '64. Moynihan had a famous treatise that came out, The Negro Family, A Case for National Action, in 1965. He laid out clearly, because of racism and how we are as a country and how we've done things, that there was no way for the African American population to be successful the way we were doing things. The President Reagan then came through in '80 with the promise to curtail the welfare state. Next chart, please. And during that, Murray put a book out, who's another scholar, and these things are phenomenal to read, Losing Ground in 1984. The welfare state actually made the problem worse by discouraging the poor from working and giving them incentives not to marry. And it followed up almost 17 years after Moynihan's treatise for the UN, but the same thing. Bush 1, George H. Bush, President Bush, proposed a mandatory work program for ADC got changed to AFDC to include families and to include the disabled as well, but that was never implemented. Jenkins had a great book, and people still to this day are quoting Jenkins, and the idea that government action could solve or even ameliorate social problems became unfashionable in the late 70s, and federal spending was increasingly seen as a waste. That was in 1992. Interestingly, though, even though that was said, and everybody said, oh, we know spending's not the answer, when you see the charts, you'll see that spending, even adjusted for inflation, has increased dramatically, well above the inflation rate. Clinton, in 1996, President Clinton passed the most stringent rollback of welfare benefits. The work benefit that was mandated had not only were there credible and enforced monetary sanctions for noncompliance, but they stayed right there. They put in added time limits for the AFDC, as you know, and that was renamed to TANF. Clinton's actions in '96 actually reduced the number of single mothers served by 63% in 10 years, between '96 and 2006. What actually happened to real per capita spending, the amount we spent per person in poverty, for all major programs taken together, there's 15 of them, adjusted for inflation, then divided by the size of the population. The growth of spending has continued to rise steadily. Rapid growth in the 70s was 60% from 1970 to 1975, in that 6-year period. Spending growth from 75 to 86 was relatively stable. As you know, that was a period of time of low inflation, so the increase was roughly 2.5% a year, 25%. Spending from 86 to 2007 grew by 74% at a much higher rate. And in 2007, the economy tanked, and that we will soon tap with that. Some of that increase, though, was simply an increase in medical prices because of Medicare and Medicaid. And it wasn't that more people were being served, it's just that the medical expenditures were so much more that they drove that up. Next slide, please. These charts you can't see, but trust me, when you look at them on your online, you'll see that the spending has rather been significant. You'll see the growth from 86 to 2007. At that same time, aids to families with dependent children went down, and you can see it's going down rather dramatically. At the same time, looking at the federal spending on welfare with inflation adjustments and with the real dollars, it shows a rather straightforward increase there. I talked about that. Then if you look at that, you look at Social Security, the supplemental, that blue line going up. So as the aid to dependent families is going down, that's going up. I think in the last year that everybody looked at the numbers, it was about 485 billion on the welfare programs, and another 90 million for SSI. SSI has gone from literally a couple $100 million to 90 billion, so that's grown dramatically. The income tax credit spending is there. That's the green line. The next one, if you look at it, will give you, next slide, please. That'll give you the child tax credit. That's another benefit that was there. You'll see that in yellow. The next slide will show you what happened with food stamps. And you can see, no surprise there, it started to go up right around the year 2000, and then has been going up pretty steadily. This map shocked me. We want to bring this back to home. If you asked me before we did this work, how many of you actually represent people who fit the federal definition of poverty, I would have said 10 or 12. I sat there for 4 years, and it was an honor and privilege to sit there. I assumed, it's not that wide full. When you count that out, 25 out of 39 districts have federal poverty as by the definition of people who are anywhere from at the federal poverty guideline or below it. And again, as we remind you, it's for family of 4, 23,000, and it's almost 12,000 for an individual under 65. So this is easy for you to blow up. I want to thank John Merrill for being kind enough to give us the districts to superimpose that. The colors of that map we can't change. That's U.S. Census colors. That's the way they do it. So I know it's hard to see, but you have that individually at your desk, and you can see your district. Next slide, please. Here's Albany County's numbers since 1970. If you look at the census shows the 69, 70, the 2 years that they worked on the census. You can see roughly 25,000 were below the poverty level for that year. And then it's gone up to now roughly 37,700 in 2012. And you can see out of the, you're looking at 13%. So despite all the spending, the rate of poverty is increasing. And there's a lot of sociological reasons for that. There's a lot of economic reasons for that. Outsourcing of manufacturing, a whole host of other things that have been bad for the poor in our community. We've got my rant about dealing with the Department of Social Services. I would appreciate if you take a look at that, because I'm going to ask the chairwoman, Mafia Tobler, if I can address her committee to go through this while the chairman or while the commissioner's there. But there are a host of things there that are quite serious. That when you'll look at that, you'll understand why we're recommending a rather serious response to this. Can you take us to the America Works case? By the way, these are all audits or times we try to get things done with social services. The staff are phenomenal, but the commissioners, deputy commissioners, the political people stonewall like there's no tomorrow. Most recently, our office performed an audit on America Works after referral from the county executive's group of well, I guess the police group. This outsourced jobs program used to be run by people who work for Albany County, and they did a great job. A lot of you, the older folks in here, would remember Ed Shannon and some of the other people. They did a great job. We outsourced it to a contractor. We pay him, almost, what is it, $360, something like that, almost $400,000 a year. We found on the claims we looked at, which were different claims than the county executive staff had looked at, that in over 50% of them, they could not provide documentation, they did not comply with the contract, they did not deserve to be paid. We held back payment. We also found that the DSF staff amended contracts that by the charter you must approve. And they did this in some occasions verbally or by email without any kind of documentation going to the legislature. We also, as you know, are in litigation, so I won't say anything about that, but the real battle is that America Works does not want us to go any further than these 20 cases. And of course, the way I see it, there's gold in them there hills. I want to go get it. Next slide, please. One of the things I think is very important, and a lot of us don't realize this, when we downsize case managers, adult protective, and a lot of the other cases, it's rah, 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 we feel great about the budget, we've laid these people off. We have people who literally have 180 to 200 cases. I don't care who you are. If you're Superwoman, Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, you cannot handle that many cases. So we just shovel paperwork, and people just can't keep up with it. It's a disgrace, and it's something that really bears serious study, and we're going to make a recommendation to you about that. There is a failure on the federal, state, and local level to do anything significant about poverty. There's no way you can tell me what we're doing works. All you have to do is drive through any of our districts. If you drive through the old 4th district, now 3rd, or any of the other districts, the other 24 that have poverty, there are problems and we need to do something about it. Next. We have 3 suggestions for your consideration. I think you need to investigate the county about looking at demonstration waiver grants. There's other counties that do it. Erie does it, Chemung does it, Nassau. There's dozens of counties that do this. It's a creative way of saying, look, we want to do something about poverty. We want to change the program. and you make an application to HHS and through, depending on whether it's for health care or anything else, you use DOH or whatever the appropriate agency is. It may be TANF or OTDA or whoever else you have to deal with. But we should be doing that. We aren't. We used to do that, by the way, about 15 years ago. Our office is going to be procuring estimates for Department of Social Services Management and Productivity Study. There is a state contract out there, and we're going to go out and look at that. And I think it's about time for us to go back and look at that. I think the critical thing about a management and productivity study, you bring in an outsider, you interview people at their desk, the line staff. You get what you really need to know from the people who are really doing the work. And a lot of great ideas will come out of that, just like it did in 94, 95 when we worked on that back then. It was money well spent. We invested probably about $1.2 million then, Frank, I think, and we saved about $23 million by doing that. I'm not saying you can save that kind of money, but I'm saying that we need to do something different. We have lost the war on poverty. I don't care what anybody tells you. When you have poverty that continues to grow like this, we're losing. We've got to do something different. I think the third thing for you to consider, and this is something in your purview, that you and the executive have proven you can do something about the nursing home. The nursing home was an issue we brought to the legislature and the executive in 2002. You folks, to your credit, grabbed the bull by the horns last year and this year, and you're making a difference in improving the quality of care, and you're improving the facility, and you're reducing what the costs are to the taxpayers. I remember, I don't mean to speak ill of a budget director, and I would hope John Rodette wasn't upset when I said this, but we had 3 years when John was running this that we lost $20 million a year at our nursing home, when Rensselaer County only lost about $2.5 to $3 million. So it clearly is a management issue, and I think it's something to be done. I think that you folks are incredibly busy. If you could have somebody look at this as a task force about poverty and what we're going to do, we've got to do that. And the reason I think you have to do it is that, from my experience, the federal government, in the 18 and a half years I've been comptroller and 4 years as a legislator, I have never seen anything good come out of the feds for us, nor have I seen anything come out of the state that's good for us. But I've seen you come up with some tremendous ideas and use your creativity, your hard work, and your diligence, and I think that you can do something about this on a small level. And you might only start with 50 or 100 families, but remember the difference that you can make. You can reverse that unending spiral of poverty. And it's not right. It's a tremendous waste of potential. If I was still in the private sector and running an insurance agency, I'd go out and recruit 100 people from that jail, because some of the best salespeople you have in this county are out that jail. The fact is, what's that say about us, that we lose that kind of human potential? And, the sheriff does a great job with the jail. He is cheaper than going to Harvard. Harvard's about $58,000, and sheriff's only about $47,000 or $48,000. So, it's an expensive thing to lose someone. And if you go younger than the sheriff's age limit and you look at the state programs, you're looking at a couple $100,000 a year per bed. So there's a chance for us to do some great things, and we would hope that you do that. I'm more than willing to take questions, but I would suggest that you can email, unless you have a pressing question, email me the questions. I'll get back to you, or I'll come back to the committees. The sheriff has been waiting, and we did get a late start, so because of nobody being here. But and I suppose if I could get out of here and meet gas bag, I wouldn't be here either. But if you have any immediate questions, I'd be more than willing to take those. And I do appreciate the privilege of the floor. And Sheriff, my apologies for going.
Take your time.
Well, I went fast. I'm 22 minutes below last year.
Controller, I just have a simple question.
Yes.
I think the controller indicated that Albany County has some unclaimed funds.
Yes.
Is that part of the $5.4 million that you indicated that we have lost to the state?
No. The unclaimed funds that Legislator McKnight is talking about is that there are funds that Albany County, from any amount, that haven't claimed. It's interesting you bring that up, and I mean, if you want, I'll share emails with you. We ask Finance regularly, are you doing this? We were told by email by the Director of Finance that they do it every month. So,
You'll see.
well, they haven't, but anything else? Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.